Andrew Spencer, President of the Caribbean Maritime University, Vice Presidents, academic and ancillary staff, students of the Caribbean Maritime University, our invited guests who are all special this evening, our guest presenter who will be better known later on, and of course, I must mention the founder of the Center for Security, Counterterrorism and Non-Proliferation, Mr. Owen Ellington. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for accepting our invitation to be present at this lecture this evening, a lecture that we consider to be timely and relevant based on our peculiar challenges that we are having in Jamaica as it relates to border, security, tourism management, and all those issues about which our guest lecturer will be speaking later on. I want to remind you that you're on maritime ground, and once you're on the maritime ground, then sailing will become part of that experience. So at this time, I'm going to ask you to just fasten your life jackets, sit back, and enjoy what we know will be a great evening. We want to leave here hearing from our guest presenter because we believe in peer reviews, we believe in hearing from the experts. And so I want you to sit back this evening to enjoy what is reserved for you. At this time, I'm going to be calling on the President of the Caribbean Maritime University, Professor Andrew Spencer, who will come forward and give the opening remarks. Join me, ladies and gentlemen, in welcoming to the podium our esteemed President, Professor Andrew Spencer.
Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to you all. I ask that you give a round of applause for the distinguished ladies and gentlemen in our midst. So you're clapping yourselves. Everybody here is distinguished today. I'm very pleased to be here to welcome you to an important lecture for a number of reasons. Some 19 years ago, when I first interfaced with the notion of security and strategic studies, Mr. Ellington will tell you about those days when there was a pioneering program that was taking place in another location. And we saw the impact and the gravitas, and in fact, the high level of credence that that program brought to our security forces. And little did I know that almost 2 decades later, we'd be in another place having a very important discussion where Mr. Ellington, former commissioner, is now in another capacity, and where I am in another capacity, where we're championing the cause for ensuring that we are at the forefront of the conversation and the discourse surrounding security matters. I'm very pleased with what Mr. Ellington and his team, Mr. Thompson, have done with this program. And when I just got to the CMU some almost 17 months ago, one of the things that I was challenged with, and I don't have issues with public speaking, is saying Center for Security, Counterterrorism, and Non-Proliferation without biting my tongue. But here we are today, and I want to specially welcome Assistant Commissioner of Police Gary McKenzie, who has joined us. Let's make him welcome. many other officials who have joined us from the security forces and from the public sector as well as private sector. We are happy to have you. I want to also specially recognize the leadership of the CMU gathered here. I see at least 3 vice presidents in the audience. I'd like to welcome Professor Ajaguna, Dr. McLean, and Mr. Eaton Chin. Just making sure I cover all the bases there. And I see a number of directors, managers, heads of programs, and very importantly, and probably most importantly, our students. Let's give them a round of applause. Why is today so important, and why are we gathered in this fashion? Those of you who know me understand that for all intents and purposes, I am the tourism guy. Yes? Tourism runs through my veins. And the intersection between tourism and security became particularly exciting to me a few years ago when my path crossed a certain gentleman, having been the CEO for the tourism product development company that was responsible for all matters to do with destination assurance. Destination assurance really was defined by us as safety, security, and seamlessness. So we weren't talking about Sun, Sea, and Sand as tourism experts. We were talking about safety, security, and seamlessness. Now, we thought we had the seamlessness bit sorted out. And then I met a gentleman who came to give us some assistance on a project of stabilizing our space. And he was keen to explain to us the difference between safety and security as he understood it. And then he was also keen to introduce us to a concept known as tourism surety. I know he remembers that. And so I'm very excited that today we have converging in one place the Caribbean Maritime University. And most of you who have talked to me before know that I value the Caribbean Maritime University as the most important tertiary institution in the Caribbean. Not because I'm associated with it, but because it sits at the very heart of everything that we do and consume and all our trade and the movement of our people. We provide the full gamut of skills and talent that we'll treat with end-to-end logistics. But an important part of all of that is how we treat with our borders. And so I'm happy to talk about the fact that one of our programs will be renamed as Border Operations and Management beginning in September 2024. Stay tuned for more information on that. But the gentleman I told you about is a man known as Dr. Peter Tarlow, who has done it all, ladies and gentlemen. He has consulted and designed training programs for many governments. I think he has touched every single continent. He will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's worked with them all. And he tells me today that he's 77 years old and he's trying to stop, and they will not let him stop because he's recently engaged some additional governments in fine-tuning their security apparatus. So I want us to give a rousing round of applause, a CMU welcome to Dr. Peter Tarlow. Fabulous. And you will understand why it is we have brought Dr. Tarlow here once he's engaged you today. I look forward to being, again, tantalized by the things he shares. He's a thought leader in his area. And I won't tell you too much about our relationship because I suspect he will do so. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not the keynote. And when you're accustomed to being keynote, you could speak for a while, right? But I'm simply here to bring you welcome, and I give you the warmest welcome and ask that, 1, you absorb it all. That 2, you will engage with our speaker because he's looking forward to that interaction. And 3, that you will leave with some key takeaways for how you can play your part in helping to strengthen the conversation and the action around border security. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Prof. Spencer. Ladies and gentlemen, you are in the presence of a transformational leader, a man who is able to identify, prioritize, and solve problems. We have seen his work here at the Caribbean Maritime University, And he told you that he is here for only 17 months. But just look at the transformation that has taken place. Give him another round of applause, please. So we would not allow our guest speaker or guest lecturer to come here and to lecture to us without having a proper introduction. And so at this time, I'm going to be calling upon Miss Tanisha Roach Hansen from the Center for Security, Counterterrorism and Non-Proliferation to come forward and to introduce our guest lecturer, Miss Tanisha Hansen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Peter Tarlow. He is a world-renowned speaker and an expert in specializing in the impact of crime and tourism on the tourism industry. Dr. Tarlow began his professional journey in tourism in 1990. He earned his PhD in sociology from Texas A&M University. He also holds multiple degrees. Currently, Dr. Tarlow is a founder and president of Tourism and More, Inc. He is also the president of the World Tourism Network, with members in over 130 nations. Dr. Tarlow's experience has given him the opportunity to work with numerous government agencies, including the US Customs, the FBI, the Department of Justice, just to name a few. He is currently working with the Gannett Flaming Engineering on security on US government buildings in Washington, D.C. In 2018, the government of Jamaica appointed Dr. Tarlow to become a member of the Jamaica National Tourism Security Audit Team. A year later, Dr. Tarlow heads the team and was also tasked with the job of developing a national tourism security program. In addition, Dr. Tarlow lectures and trains tourism professionals and security personnel in multiple languages on a wide range of current and future trends in the tourism industry, of course. Dr. Tarlow has been asked to be an expert witness in courts throughout the United States on matters concerning security and safety and issues of risk management. He is a well-renowned author in his field in the tourism industry. Ladies and gentlemen, help me to welcome Dr. Peter Tarlow.
Good evening, and thank you for the very warm introduction. This is a special time to be here. I considered it so important that this morning I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I only got here late in the afternoon. So I've been traveling literally across the world. Hopefully, I can stay awake, I keep you awake, and I won't fall asleep while I'm speaking. I also want to thank my good friend, President Spencer. I don't know him as President Spencer. I kind of know him as my little brother in the Caribbean. We've written several books together. We're currently writing a book together on human trafficking and sex trafficking. And so I know you know him as President Spencer. I call him Andrew. I want to thank the members of the faculty, the students, members of the private industry who've come here today. And I'm going to try to speak about 2 or 3 topics and merge them together in a valuable area. I was asked to speak for about 35 or 40 minutes, and then to leave time for questions. So please don't feel at all, whatever question you ask, that's good to go. Now, one of the things that the person who introduced me did not say is that not only am I a member of my own police department in College Station, Texas, but I'm also the chaplain. And as chaplain, I kind of try to merge the concepts of the Bible with tourism. So I'm going to start with a quiz. As you know, tourism is extraordinarily important here in the Caribbean. And part of the ways that tourism is so important is with group tourism. So many of you are or will be in one way or the other in the tourism industry. Who invented group tourism? Anybody got an idea? You have an idea? Scream it out. Who created the idea of group tourism? And it really has to do with cross-border tourism. Who? I couldn't hear you. Scream it out. Moses, whoever, she got it. Yep, the first person to create took us on a group tour. It was a long tour. It was 40 years across the Sinai. It had to get from one border to the other, but he did it. Now, in the same way, we're at a maritime university. So I would be remiss not to speak a little bit about the maritime world. And of course, one of the major issues throughout the entire Caribbean is cruise tourism. So now that you know who invented group tourism, who invented cruise tourism? Somebody on this side. You got it, right. Noah was the person who invented it. He created the first tour. Now, Noah in Hebrew is Noach, which means to veg out. And he had 3 children who went with him. Anybody know their name? You have Shem, which... Oh, you got it. Okay. So Japhet, or Japh, I think they call it in English, means pretty boy. And Shem means he thinks he's a big deal. And how well does that describe cruises and tourism around the world? Often that's one of the big issues. So, having said that, I'm going to try to merge both tourism security, which is my personal field, and also border security. Now, I took a little time to think about some of the issues in tourism surety. And let me start by distinguishing between those two. Safety is when you do something to yourself. Now, there's a sense of, I didn't see the fence was there, and I tripped over it. The floor was wet, and I slid. So one way or the other, nobody did something to hurt me. For whatever reason, I didn't see it. Security is when intentionally I want you to hurt yourself. So instead of my not noticing that the floor is wet and accidentally tripping, I put water there, don't put a sign up, and let you trip. Instead of having the railing not be well fastened, I unfasten the railing so that you will fall. So safety is when we do something that hurts ourselves. Security is the prevention of someone else trying to hurt me. It could be robbery, it could be stealing, it could be murder. Whatever it is, it happens to do someone wanted to hurt another person. Tourism surety, of which President Spencer mentioned, is really the combination of 5 different products: safety, security, economics, because tourism is all about economics, reputation, and today, what we call biosecurity or health. We all learned from the pandemic of COVID what happens when there's a pandemic. And it would be a mistake to believe that would be the last pandemic. So we have to be prepared for other pandemics. When we put all those together, we get tourism surety or tourism well-being. You can use either word. But in both cases, It doesn't do me any good to create great security if nobody knows I'm doing it. If you don't have good security, eventually people will not come, and that will hurt the economics of your situation. So having said that, I looked at some of the issues that are going around the world today. What do we notice? We notice that in a post-Brexit world, and now it could be Italy's talking about the same, France, Holland, we have the rise of a new nationalism. We see shifting types of travel and travelers, and therefore new demands for security. We have bogus offerings and problems, and these range from holiday websites that are not telling the truth to bogus claims that travelers have gotten sick. We have more and more issues of cybersecurity and AI security. And in either case, we are now facing worlds we've never looked before. We're looking at the problem of biomedical security. And how do we begin to handle those issues? And one of the issues, and today I'll focus in on this, is the issue of cross-border security. Now, cross-border security touches many subtopics. For example, with the issue of illegal immigration, with the issue of drug smuggling, with the issue of human and sex trafficking, with the issue of terrorism, with the issue of cyber attacks, with the issue of space warfare, and soon with people planted on the moon, we may have attacks coming from outer space. We have AI attacks that are crossing borders, and that is creating all new types of realities. And we have cruise security, which is where you have a hotel that's literally floating from one border to another, from one country to another. And so all of those are just the tip of the iceberg. We could spend the next week on each one of these. So it is not my goal to go into detail. It's my goal to whet your appetite, to give you a smorgasbord of ideas. And what I am going to do is I've kept all my notes. I'm going to be sending those to Dr. Spencer. And then anyone who would like them, he will send them out to you electronically on Thursday after I get home. So you don't have to take notes. You'll have them there. Now, some of the areas in the world where we're seeing border security issues, and I'll go into some of this in much more detail. Certainly, the hottest issue today in border security is the US-Mexican border. And I will try to touch upon that. That will probably be the #1 election issue in the United States in the 2024 elections. 2, we see the issues of Hamas in Israel, and which is both land border security and aquatic border security because of the issue of the Houthis attacking shipping in the Red Sea and in the Persian Gulf. So in both cases, we have both terrorism and border issues taking place. We see European security with the issue of immigration going from Libya to especially Italy, but also to Crete and southern Europe, and causing all sorts of immigration issues and boats that are sinking and loss of life. And so therefore, that is border security that Europe's facing in its soft underbelly. We're seeing border security, and don't be shocked when we see a new war breaking out on the Korean Peninsula. Yesterday, Korea tested, for the first time, a nuclear missile. And we're going to be seeing, and they're talking about having a nuclear submarine fleet. That's North Korea. Seoul is only, the capital of South Korea, is less than 20 miles from the North Korean border. So the potential for a new border war taking place between Korea, northern part of the peninsula, and South Korea is very high. And then in the Caribbean, we have multiple issues, one of which is, of course, the issues of refugees leaving Haiti, both by boat and crossing the border into the Dominican Republic. Now, many of you may know that the Dominican Republic and Haiti have a long history of not being friends. And the Dominican Republic currently is building a border wall across the length of its border with Haiti. On the other hand, we're seeing in Haiti refugees trying to get to Florida, trying to get to other parts of the Caribbean, and that has created all sorts of problems. Added to that, because so you shouldn't get bored, we have the issue of cartels, especially creating submarines for the purpose of traveling with drugs across the Caribbean, and not just to the United States. For example, Saint Martin in the Caribbean, the French site, Saint Martin, is especially vulnerable to border security because once you have something in the French side, that is part of metropolitan France. Once you're in some of the French Caribbean islands, you're in Europe. And without European borders, it means you can go very quickly from the Caribbean, the French part of the Caribbean, to Europe with as much smuggling as you want, and it's going to take a major issue to find that. Just in order to add to that, in case we're still bored, we're looking at the potential for war between Venezuela and Guyana. The potential, Peru and Ecuador have closed their border due to the recent troubles in Ecuador, and I'm working with the government of Ecuador, so I can give you lots of details about that. So what we're seeing is there is literally no continent of which we are not seeing problems. And I haven't yet begun to mention the border security issues between Pakistan and India, Iran's bombing of Pakistan, Syria, and Turkey, and of course what's happened in the last few days with American servicemen being murdered in Jordan by drone attacks. So all of these are, you can argue, interconnected. And of course, I haven't even begun to talk about the whole issue of the Ukraine and the fact that Putin has said that he needs to liberate not only Russian speakers in the Ukraine, but also in the Balkans and in Poland. And those are NATO countries, which would mean basically a world war. So we live in very, very perilous times. Again, I could speak about each one of these issues for an hour. You would probably want to shoot me at the end. So I'm just kind of mention them and make sure you understand just how complicated the world is. Having said that, we face some other problems. One, the public to a great extent does not believe what is being told. We have the lowest confidence rate in the media that the world has ever known. Most people believe the media is just entertainment or filled with lies. Secondly, politicians around the world simply do not have the support of their public. Now, I know that's probably not true in Jamaica, where everything is wonderful, but certainly in Europe, in the United States, in Asia, you have very different types of problems. On top of that, the upper levels of the traveling public, because there's more than one level, but the very wealthy people are showing signs of fear. And that's very important because those are the people who spend a lot of money. And so you get a much bigger bang for your buck when someone is wealthy visits than when someone who's, say, someone with a knapsack traveling through the hinterlands of Peru. They're both tourists, but they spend very different amount of money. Now, on top of all this, we have issues of terrorism that we have to begin to think about. Terrorism is different from crime. Crime is all about using the tourism industry in a parasitic relationship. In other words, if people don't come to an event, there's nobody to steal from. If nobody comes to Jamaica, I can't pick your pocket. So from the criminal's perspective, I want high levels of tourism. From terrorism is not economic. Terrorism is ideological. And so the purpose of terrorism is not to steal from you. The purpose of terrorism is to destroy you. Those are two very different worlds, and we need to understand those. Tourism, and especially the ocean world, functions as a magnet for acts of terrorism for lots of reasons. Think about it. tourism is all about accepting the other. In the tourism world, we say, we don't care if you're white, black, green, blue, yellow, male, female, gay, heterosexual, straight. Come spend your money, put your money in a hotel, we're happy with you. Terrorism hates money. The concept of terrorism is, I live well, you live poorly. So in every society that has been dominated by terrorism, and we see this, for example, Hamas, their leadership is all in fancy $500 a night hotels in Qatar. The people of Gaza are suffering. But they could care less as long as they're making money. Secondly, the tourism industry is very pro-women. Matter of fact, many of the top leaders in the tourism industry are women. In terrorism, a woman's job is to help me get power and then bye-bye birdie. So it doesn't matter if you're looking at Senderos Iluminosos in Peru, or you're looking at Hitler in Germany, or you're looking at Al-Qaeda, or you're looking at Hamas. In all cases, the woman is there for only one purpose, to help me, the male, get power, and after that, you're worthless. Those are two very different worlds. The world of tourism is all about helping people, helping women move up in the world. The world of terrorism is keeping women down in the world, to have you serve me in nothing more than that. Tourism is all about understanding and appreciating the other. If we're all the same, there's no reason to come here. If you don't have anything to sell in Jamaica, why be here? What makes Jamaica Jamaica is Jamaican culture, Jamaican food, Jamaican art. Terrorism believes if you're not like me, you're worthless. And therefore, what happens? When we combine that with such things as the cruise industry, the tourism industry and the cruise industry and countries that live by the ocean are now threats to the terrorist. My job, if I'm a terrorist, not as my job, but were I to be a terrorist, is to destroy you. I want you to be out of business. And so we see this in many different parts of the world. Now, to add to that, there's lots of complications that we're just beginning to understand. Most people see their own culture as multifaceted and the other culture as unifaceted. In other words, don't all Christians think alike? Don't all Jews think alike? Don't all Muslims think alike? If you're outside of that culture, it might look that way. Once you're in that culture, it's completely different. And so what are we seeing? We're seeing multiple Middle East. The Middle East is not just Arabs and Israelis. Were Israel not to be there, the Middle East would still be boiling. Because you have the Sunnis, you have the Shiites, you have the fact that you have Syria and Iran on one side, and Saudi Arabia and Egypt on another side. And they all don't get along. And they hate each other just as much as they hate everybody else. In the European theater, we see this type of situation. Europeans are struggling with the issue of immigration and Boers culture. Look what happened in Holland. Who would have ever thought that Holland would elect a prime minister who sees his number one job as throwing foreigners out of the country? Germany is now going through the fact of, and while there have been many protests against it, the part of German society wants to expel anyone who's not a native German and does not fit in with German culture. That's a reversion back to 1940. Now, they're not talking concentration camps, but they are talking expulsion. If you're black, you have no role to play. If you're Jewish, you have no role to play in Europe. If you are a gay, you're not going to have a role to play. If you're from the Middle East or an immigrant, you're not going to have a role to play. These are now discussions that are taking place due to cross-border problems and the fact of how much security is correct. Do I let anybody in, or do I not let anybody in? how welcoming should I be or not be? And that means another major issue. Around the world, we are moving to technology. Technology has some wonderful parts. It does not work in tourism. Tourism is all about the linking of heart to heart and mind to mind. So if I come to a place and all I see is someone wants me to download a QR term, or somebody wants me to just go through some sort of machine, you know what? You've lost a major level of security. And you've also lost the ability to market your country. The first thing that is important when I come to a country is, do you greet me? Do I get a smile? Do you say welcome? A machine cannot do that. Look at the airline industry, how difficult it is to deal with airlines. I had a problem last week on a flight to Peru from Texas, and it was not American Airlines, but it could easily have been. And I called them up and I said, I want to tell you how you guys took a 6-hour flight and turned it into a 36-hour flight, and all the mistakes you made. And the answer was, we don't speak to people. You have to send us an email. Well, you know what? There was no way for that person to find out exactly what I thought, or how it was, or what my emotions were, or would I come back to them or not. So I had to write a letter to an email, and they said, say whatever you want to say in 1,000 words. Well, if you know me, you know 1,000 letters. I wrote 12 pages in detail, and then insisted they get it one way or the other. And all the answer was, we're sorry, here's a certificate, a travel certificate. That's not what I needed. I needed to know they care. Tourism is based on hospitality. And that means that hospitality has to touch me from the moment I land and to the moment I leave. Because I'm part of you, and that's border security. I got the opportunity of training U.S. Customs and U.S. Immigration. And the first thing I taught them was smile. The more you engage with a visitor, the more information you're getting. Why are you coming? Oh, are you going to see your family? Who do they live with? When you leave, tell me about your trip. That's reconnaissance, gang. If you're listening carefully, you can prevent a terrorism attack simply by having good eye contact and knowing how to use and seeing if the person's sweating or not sweating. If I'm with a machine, the machine could care less. And so I want you to at least think about that, because that's a major problem, especially as we're now moving to AI. That means, and those of you who follow, and I'm not a big Taylor Swift fan, but those of you who followed the big scandal this week when somebody reproduced her. They reproduced her voice, they reproduced her image. You could not tell the difference, and that was not she. And now, could I do that to any person in this room? Yes. Could I frame you? Could I now claim that you were out shooting somebody in the middle of Montego Bay when you're here with me tonight in Kingston? Absolutely. So we have to begin to really think through, if we don't have personal interaction, if it's going to be machine to machine, what's going to happen to our levels of security? So here are a few key things, because I don't have a lot of time, that I'd like to leave with you, some principles. One, the higher the cluster of tourism amenities and attractions, the greater the threat. Two, the most dangerous time in cruise ships is 20 or 30 minutes before the ship sails. If I'm a criminal, why do I want to rob you 20 minutes before we leave? Because you don't have the time to report it to the police. You're not going to lose that ship sailing while you're filling out a report. And so you know what you're going to do? I'll just let it go. What is that telling me? That in crime, especially in crime, most police statistics are wrong. Now, I'm not saying the police are lying. Don't misunderstand me. I'm saying visitors don't report it. For every crime that probably existed that is reported, there's probably 10 or 20 that were never reported. The average visitor just assumes that they're going to be away, the police are not going to have time to do it, they'll never get their money back anyway, let it go. On the other hand, how many people do fill out crime reports because they want a new camera or they want a new computer, and therefore they falsely claim? So you have real reports that are not filled out and fake reports that are filled out. So again, that's where human beings come in. The greater the presence of police, the higher perception of safety and money that's spent. Now, I don't know how many police officers are here. If you're a police officer, raise your hand. Any? Okay. So I'm part of you guys. The belief in the tourism industry was that police scare visitors. The reality is, if you have well-trained police, especially tourism police, visitors report having a better time, they spend more money, and they have a higher probability of coming back. Police are a valuable form of the tourism industry, and we're not using them. And that means we have to train them, we have to praise them, et cetera, et cetera. The same thing is true of people in the maritime world. When I look at someone in a uniform, I don't really know if you're in the Merchant Marine, or in the Navy, or in the police, or in the military. I see a uniform. What does that mean? I think when I have a problem, I can turn to you, and you're there to help me. People like seeing people in uniform. Now, they especially like it when you smile. A matter of fact, in Reno, Nevada, I created what we call the Smile Squad, which is police who have been specially trained to smile. People come and have their picture taken, because there's nothing they like better than having a picture taken with a smiling police officer. That has brought in thousands of dollars to Reno, Nevada. And the cost of it was almost nothing. It was simply teaching people to smile and getting people to say, welcome, I'm so happy you're here. Very little thing. You don't need high tech for low tech. So, because I will go on for about 7 hours, and Andrew will shoot me, I'm going to talk about a little bit about the U.S. Border and some lessons we've learned from October 7th. And then I'm going to open it up for questions. So the U.S. border is truly a mess. We have someplace between, last month we had 300,000 illegals that we know of. We don't know how many people are not there. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics, and I have to be very careful because it's not a political speech, between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But basically, the Biden administration said, anything the Trump administration did, we're going to do the opposite, which has been somewhat of a challenge, to say the least. So what are we now seeing? Because the border is so dangerous, people are going and they're buying arms. There are now cities, including New York and Chicago, have had major problems, and people that saw themselves as sort of liberal, such as, for example, the African American community or the Latino community, now are seeing the border as a threat to their livelihood. African American children are being taken out of daycare centers so that illegal immigrants can have those centers for a place to live. Latinos are realizing for the first time, everyone thinks the Latinos would be pro-open borders. They're not. You know why? Because basically open borders means new slavery. Give you a very simple example. I have a gardener. He's now an American citizen. He's absolutely legal in the United States. He gets $15 an hour. I can easily fire him and hire somebody else for $2 an hour. All the work he did, I won't, by the way, but all the work he did is now being destroyed because of what we now call mercado de esclavos, the slave market. And basically, when people say, oh, it's because Americans don't want to do it, what we're saying is somebody else will do it, and they're going to do our dirty work. That's called slavery. No matter how you look at it, an open border turns into slavery. And that's a major problem. Now, both in October 7th and in the United States, a second issue. And so I won't go into all the details, but I will give you one basic principle. And that is, if I understand high tech, then low tech will undo high tech. If I don't understand high tech will beat low tech. Let me repeat that again. If I understand high tech, the way for me to defeat you is low tech. I don't send an email. I write it out by hand. I do simple things like a carrier pigeon. And you know what? The people who are so interested in high technology will miss all the stuff in the low technology. We saw that on the Gaza border. We see that in the United States, where they said instead of having soldiers or people guarding the border, they want to have it with computers or with high tech. It doesn't work. On top of that, I have lots of friends in the U.S. Border Patrol and in the Merchant Marine, and they feel undervalued. And the moment you take your security people and they lose their esprit de corps, you're going to have a major problem. And one of the things we have to do in border security is make sure that you know that you're appreciated. So, for example, across Latin America, we have problems with corruption, especially in police departments. But when you pay somebody a wage that's not enough to pay for rent, no less food, you know what? Corruption seeks in. Think about it. There are two groups of people who save lives. People in security, any of you guys in security, and doctors. We pay a doctor a lot because we know him by name. We don't know the people in security, and therefore we don't pay them a lot. But until we are serious about understanding that people in security are as important to us as our doctors, and certainly more important than a football coach. I come from Texas A&M University. We just fired our football coach and gave the guy $72 million to be fired. My dream is to be a football coach for one day and be fired. You could, like 2 minutes, I will tell you right now, even if you only pay me $1 million for that 1 minute, my ego could take it. But what are we teaching young people when we say that I'm going to pay almost nothing to someone in security, but I'm going to pay a football coach $1 million a game? What type of ethics is that? And that's where border security begins. It begins with an understanding of values. Until we value human life, we won't have good security. So we have to start at that level. When people say to me all the time, we need more police in order to stop crime, my answer to them is no. And abolishing poverty will not stop crime. My grandparents were dirt poor, and they were not criminals. And I know lots of people who are very wealthy, and they are criminals. What stops crime is ethics and values. Crime stops when the churches and synagogues and whatever other religious institution you believe in teaches ethics and morality. And when we begin there in the home, that's when we stop crime. If we just look to come up with fix-its, Band-Aids, you know what? We'll be spending money until the earth comes to an end, and we will never solve the problem. So, I've probably spoken more than I was supposed to, but what I want to do now is open the floor up for as many questions as you'd like. I brought 2 books with me. Dr. Spencer and I wrote a book about security and tourism in the Caribbean, which unfortunately I didn't bring because I thought he'd have it in his office, and he's got it at home, so I'm yelling at him. This is the book I wrote on tourism security, which is used in most universities that teach security courses. Last year, I published a book on challenges to U.S. and Mexican police, and I take us all the way back to the 17th century and how those problems began right from the very beginning, and why communities have the issues that they have. And this year, Dr. Spencer and I, President Spencer and I, will be publishing a book on human trafficking and sex trafficking. If you want to see an issue when it comes to border security, that's the issue. Just to make it very, very quickly, and then I'll open up the floor. I started with the issue of slavery. In slavery, I reduce a human being to a commodity. I buy you. You're a commodity. You could be Jewish or black or Asian or whatever you are, but you're a commodity. Then we can move to prostitution. In prostitution, I don't buy you, I rent you. Right? In other words, I rent you for the night. I use you for sexual purposes. And by the way, much to my shock, 40% of prostitutes are men. And a major issue is here in the Caribbean. Matter of fact, many of the issues when women say they were raped, they come specifically to the Caribbean, and I can name you lots of countries where they want to have a sexual liaison, and they're in their 50s, especially from England. For whatever reason, the British women seem to be, I hope nobody's here from Britain, but they do seem to be sexually frustrated. They come to the Caribbean to have sex. Then they feel bad they had it, so they accuse the man of rape. Now notice, if a man accuses a woman of rape, he's considered a pansy. If a woman charges a man for rape, there are no consequences even if she made it up. So we need to be thinking about that just a little bit. Because you know what? Not only do men lie, women lie also. But much to my shock, the Americans don't have good data on this, but the Dutch, the Germans, the Czechs, and the British do. 40% of people in the prostitution industry are men. Very shocking. Now, when we get to human trafficking, it's the worst of both worlds. In slavery, I bought you, but I have an investment in you. Right? In other words, I paid $5,000. If you die, I lose my $5,000. So I need to keep you alive. And slavery is probably for long term, and therefore we have some sort of human relationship. In prostitution, it's quick. You're rented out, but there's no relationship, but it's for a very short period of time. And human trafficking and sexuality is the worst of both. The person is captured as a slave, but then turned into a prostitute, be it for labor or be it for sex. That person is then used over and over again. In today's world, the cartels are making more money from human trafficking than they are from illegal drugs. Because if I buy heroin or marijuana or cocaine or whatever it is, you made the sale and you got your money. It's over. But if I rent you out I can make money every day until you drop dead. And so human trafficking has now become a bigger business across borders, around the world. That means there is almost no country in the world where human trafficking does not take place. And one of the major problems is that the tourism industry, either consciously or unconsciously, is involved in it. It's involved in it in using male labor to build buildings. It's involved in it in renting out rooms so that people can have sex. It's involved in it in forcing people to become gardeners or waitresses or whatever type of labor it is. But in one way or the other, we have got to figure out a way to stop this, because people are kidnapped in one country and transported to another. And that's what post-border security is all about. So we started with Noah and Moses, and we ended up back to slavery on some level. Shows you, the French say the more things change, the more they stay the same. We are now 3,000 years since Moses. How far have we really come? And are we prepared to finally say, enough is enough? So I hope you learned something from this. I do publish a tourism newsletter. Some of you all get it. And they will send me, anyone who would like to, I'll have Dr. Spencer send me your email addresses. You can have it in English, Spanish, or Portuguese. I think probably most people here would prefer English. But it's once a month, and it talks about all forms of tourism and tourism security around the world. I thank you. I hope you got something out of this. I'm open for questions. I think this lady, just speak real loud because I'm an old man.
Oh, good evening.
Good evening.
Firstly, let me say I enjoyed your lecture very much. Thank you for coming. My question, what, if any, positive role do you believe that artificial intelligence can play in the society and in cross-border security?
Okay, let me make sure I understand. So what political role,
No.
what positive role, say it again?
What, if any, positive role do you believe that artificial intelligence
Oh, okay.
can play? Yes.
We have many, many ways that artificial intelligence can be very positive. For example, we're able to diagnose disease much better. We will be able to solve multiple crimes much better. It's an instrument. Like any instrument, a car can be used to transport me. A car can be used to make me fat because I don't choose to walk. A car can be used to ram into you and kill you. So it's not the instrument that's a danger, it's a human being and how we use it. But artificial intelligence has tremendous positive value if we choose to use it this way. The real issue is going to be people like you who've got to know artificial intelligence, know when to push it and when to stop it. And that means that we no longer can have people in security with lots of brains, with lots of brawn and little brains. I need all of you to be smart. I need all of you to be well educated. I need all of you to understand sociology, psychology, artificial intelligence, everything to do with computers and digitation, because the world is no longer what it used to be.
It's weird for someone to hold a mic for me. Okay, all right, let me, and I'll stand as well. So, thanks for the presentation, and I quite like the level at which you pitched the conversation today. For those who don't know, he's the top security expert to the UN. He doesn't want anybody to know it, but he advises governments on these things. My question, though, is, and I have to be true to my own discipline. So I heard the comment that you made about people liking to see a police presence in tourism. My view has been colored over the years on that. But let me ask you, though, what do you think about the delicate balance that has to be achieved? Simply because when I compare some spaces that I'm in, it feels like a police state. So is it that there's a presence with no weaponry? What is it that you recommend? I recently went to Dubai. I felt very safe. But I didn't see any police.
Oh, they were there.
Oh, yes. I know they were there, and I could feel them. I couldn't see them. In the same way that people talk about London having more cameras than anywhere else, or New York having more cameras. I understand that somewhere in the UAE there may be more cameras, just not seen. And so the technology is also being used to help them to be, I go back to my word, seamless. How do we find that delicate balance, especially for a tourism-dependent nation like Jamaica, that also has, as many of my friends in this room know, another kind of challenge that is antithetical to tourism?
Okay, that's a really good question. And here's my answer. First of all, cameras do not stop crime. They help you solve a crime after it's happened. London is the most cameraed city in the world, and so far the cameras have not stopped one act of terrorism. Zero. Now, they're good at solving it afterwards, but they're not good at preventing it. I'm not interested in your solving. I'm interested in proactive. Now, when it comes to police, it all depends on the training and the smiling and the type of uniform that you have. If you have a guy, recently I was asked to work in another Caribbean nation. I won't say it because I don't want to insult anybody. And I arrived there and they said, okay, we're going to start a tourism police group and we're giving you 40 police officers to start it. I said, I don't want to just take 40 police officers. They said, we chose them. I said, I'm not going to do that. They said, well, what do you want? I said, I want to speak to each one of them individually. My first question was, do you like people? 20 of them said, not really. You know what? They were not the people I needed. Then I said, do you like to smile? And 5 of them said, not really. Now I'm down to 15. Now, then I took the question. I said, tomorrow I'm going to go for a walk at 5 in the morning because at my age, you need to walk a lot in order to keep going. Would anybody like to come with me? Now, in reality, I don't need a police officer to hold my hand. I can walk on my own. What I wanted to see is how many people wanted to be with me. Who would come and who would, 5 of them said, oh, sure, we'd love to walk with you. Those are the 5 I wanted. Or I'll give you another example. Every year, I did all, now I will say where it was, at Hoover Dam in outside of Las Vegas. We have 25 million visitors, 25 million visitors a year at Hoover Dam. So every year, I rent a car, I lock the car, I make sure the keys are in the car, and I make sure the motor is running. I then go up to a police officer and say, sir, I don't know what to do. My car is running, the keys are locked. Now I do have a second set of keys. I'm not that stupid, but I don't say that. I go, I don't know what to do. The car is running, the keys are in the car. What do I do? I get 2 types of reactions. One type of reaction is, don't worry about it. My wife does it all the time. I do it all the time. No big deal. If I were a kid from Las Vegas, I'd get it up in 2 minutes flat. It'll take me 5, but I'll get it solved. The other guy doesn't say anything. He just looks at me, and his body language says, you are an idiot. How the hell did you come up with such a stupid thing to do? You know what? Those guys, if you go to Hoover Dam, during the day, we have visitors. At night, we have cross-border criminals, coyotes. Group 2 goes to night duty. Group 1 goes to day duty. Now, what am I saying to you? It's police officers who are well-trained, who understand tourism, not just sent off, helter-skelter, who look good, have nicely pressed uniforms, who are taught how to shake hands, and who are extroverted, not introverted. Those people are great for the tourism industry. You don't have to have them with a gun in your face. They just have to be present. And that presence means if you need me, I'm here. If you get lost, if you don't know where to go. Now, not everything happens to do with crime. Remember, tourists get themselves into all sorts of stupid things. When we travel, we tend to put our common sense on hold. Let me give you one example of how a police officer can change things around. So a friend of mine who's a police officer in Anaheim, California, where Disneyland is located. He's going to work. He's in the tourism police. He sees a woman crying. She's bawling. She's in terrible tears. He stops and says, ma'am, what happened? She said, I don't have my passport. He said, did anybody steal it? She said, no, I just lost it. Okay, so there's no criminal act. She said, but it's now 4:30. I called the Canadian embassy. They told me, unless I'm there by 5 o'clock, they're not going to issue me a new passport. I'm missing my wedding or whatever she was supposed to go to, not her wedding, but her family wedding. She can't go back to Canada. What did he do? He said, don't worry about it. I will take you to Los Angeles. He got her there in 22 minutes. Walked into the Canadian consul and said, she's here, she needs a passport, she needs to get on a plane tonight. Whom did she fall in love with? The Anaheim police or the Canadian consulate? He took a negative and turned it into a promotion. And when she came back to Canada, she wrote about how wonderful the police are in Anaheim, California. So the issue is not police per se, it's what do you do with them? How do you train them? They're a tool. If they're used well, they will earn you money. If they're not used well, you will lose money on them. The issue is in the training and in picking the right people. Just like you don't pick, it's like a doctor. I teach in medical school. Not everyone is right to be a general physician. Some people are better off being pathologists, where they don't talk to people. Now that's great, we need pathologists, but I also need family practice. And when you go to speak to your family doctor, if he doesn't or she doesn't have good human being skills, you got a problem. The pathologist only has to know science. So it's the same thing. If you hate people, accounting is wonderful. In policing, if you hate people, become a detective in the back room someplace. If you love people, become a tourism police officer. Or get out there and meet people and have people, when they leave Jamaica, say, wow, Jamaica cares. Hospitality is connected to the word hospital. They both come from the Latin word to take care of. You want your people in any form of law enforcement, including the Merchant Marine, to care about people. And show me how much you care about me. Because you know what? If you care about me, I'm going to spend more money, I'm going to promote you better, and I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to want to come back. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Your presentation, wide-ranging, and captures the geopolitical environment that we're currently living in. What I didn't hear you address is the issue of international displaced persons and the issue of insecurity when you have to balance your country's priority with your international responsibility, especially when you sign, for example, a UN convention to deal with issue of asylum, etc. And at the same time, preserving your reputation when mass persons come across your border.
I didn't hear the end, I'm sorry.
When a mass of persons come across your border, address that for me.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, so you really asked three questions in one. One was a question of displaced people. One was a question of asylum. One was a question of masses crossing border. Asylum is easy. International law says you must seek asylum in the next country you've hit. So if you're coming from Honduras and you hit El Salvador, you must seek asylum in El Salvador. If you're going all the way to Canada, you're not following international law. Okay? Now, asylum is a tool that was meant for people who had governments that were trying to get rid of them, not people saying, economically, I want a better life. That's called immigration. And so those are two very different issues. We have confused language to end up becoming meaningless. And in a world where I can say, well, I look like a man, I sound like a man, I have the physical features of a man, but I've declared myself to be a woman, you now have a problem. So the issue is, when we're dealing with asylum, that's easiest. Asylum is only granted when you are in a government that's going specifically against you for religious, cultural, ethnic reasons, such as, for example, the people in China, the Muslims in China, the Uyghurs, they would be a fair asylum, or the Yakuzis in Iraq, that would be a fair issue of asylum. But it has to be in the next country. You cannot go. In the United States, we now have, last month we had people from 182 countries. Sorry, that doesn't count. Secondly, displaced persons. Displaced persons are people who are displaced because of a war, and they are supposed to be within 15 years absorbed into the country they are. They're no longer displaced people. The United Nations, because we have a business now of displaced people, we keep people for 75, 80, 100 years. You cannot inherit the nomination of displaced person. My great-great-grandparents, you could argue, were displaced when they were thrown out of Russia. That's 5 generations ago. I am not a displaced person. I'm an American. My parents are American. My grandparents are American. My grandparents are American. That makes, I'm the 5th generation. You know what? I'm not a displaced person. I may choose to leave my country. That's another issue. But unless the United States is actively discriminating against me because of the color of my skin, my religion, my culture, my heritage, some reason, I'm not a displaced person, and I'm not a refugee. So I think we have to be very careful. There is a major industry today in victimization. And at some point, we've got to move, and now I shouldn't really be political, but I think we need to help people move past victimization to feeling total wholeness as human beings. As far as mass crossing of borders, this is a major problem. And one of the things that will have to be defined, for example, if I had all of Haiti's population landing in Jamaica, could you handle it? How would you handle it? All of a sudden, that would create a problem. If nobody wanted to learn English here, if now everything had to be written in Creole and English, would that create resentments? So the issue is, one, we should be working to make sure that people, for example, in Haiti, don't have to leave, that they're happy where they are, that they should be able to deal with it. Secondly, we've got to begin, it's just like on some level COVID. COVID became an industry. It ceased to be a disease, and instead became a way for people to make money. Who knows how many shots they want to give us? We may be in shot 47 by the time we're done, or 123. At some point, we got to stop it. 2 years ago, I said to people, they said, you have to be 6 feet apart. I said, why? Nobody knew. I said, what's the science? Nobody knew. But I knew. You know where that came from? A kid in the 15th century France, on the French-German border, who had a dream during the Black Plague that he should stay 2 meters away. That's the science. A dream of a young kid. That's not science. Now, if there's science, that's great. But if there's no science, what we've done is we've undercut the medical establishment. So people just don't believe it anymore. The same thing with masking. Historians in 50 years will call this the age of stupidity. We have done more damage to children. We've done more. Children can't speak properly because they couldn't see mouth because we expected a kid to wear a mask all day long at 3 years old. If anyone has ever raised a 3-year-old, you try to get a 3-year-old to wear a mask for 10 hours a day. It's an impossibility. But we came up with make-believe stuff. And then we learned that the mask ends up reinfecting you instead of breathing in fresh air. And then we sued people. The number one reason that people got COVID was lack of sunshine, lack of vitamin D, lack of vitamin C, and overweight. We should have required everybody to go to a gym, including me. Why didn't we?
Yes, Dr. Tarlow, just quickly following on that, an important underlying question, and that was kind of the undercurrent of all three of those points, was, and given your own background with UN conventions and all, how does a small country like Jamaica balance all the things that it's signatory to in the international space against its own national realities? How do we? It's a very, you raised an example earlier, which I think is very germane, but how do we navigate that space?
I think Jamaica, first of all, has a legal and ethical responsibility to take care of its own citizens. It's the first thing. You don't have somebody come into your home and take care of somebody else's child if you can't take care of your own. So the first thing you need to do is ethically make sure that you're doing as good a job as you can for taking care of Jamaica's citizens. Then you figure out ethically what is a reasonable number to accept other people within the economy and the capabilities of this country. But you just don't have open borders. And listen, it was not easy to get into Jamaica today. I mean, I won't go into details, but I'll just say it was not easy. But the first thing you do, God helps those who help themselves. And I don't care if you're a Christian, Jewish, whatever, that's a basic principle. Are you doing a good job in caring for the citizens of Jamaica? If you're not, you need to ask why not. If yes, and you're satisfied, then you figure out how many people can you absorb that will be able to be absorbed and Jamaicanized, for lack of a better word, become part of the Jamaican culture. But if I want to be here and set up another society within Jamaica, you don't have the right or the ethics to commit suicide. And that would be the equivalent of national suicide. And you don't have and suicide is immoral under any circumstance.
We take a final question. Just one more question.
You're probably sick of hearing me at this point, but if I got you to think a little bit, I consider that to be a success. And who's the last question?
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Okay. Make sure I can hear you, okay?
Yes, and thank you for your lecture. I want to ask a question centered around AI.
Yes, sir.
Now, Jamaica is reported to have 497 miles of coastline
Yes.
with 14 legitimate points of entry. It is also reported that we have 145 illegal points of entry.
At least.
At least. I want to ask the question, do you believe that AI has a role to play with regards to policing and managing these porous points of entry? And if so, how do we integrate AI into our human capacity with treating on porous borders? And further to that, sir, earlier you did mention about the US and its border issues and the use of AI, which you had stated proved futile. For Jamaica being a small island state, which is lesser in geographical space than in the US, what is your view on us integrating AI?
Okay. The first thing, all policing or security is dependent on the political will of a country. So in the United States currently, we do not have the political will to deal with the issue. Were we to have had the political will, it might have come up with a very different type of answer. Now, the first thing is, I don't know the political will of Jamaica. I'm not a Jamaican. But if your political will is that you want to have that you want to have protected borders, and you're willing to back up your security people. Now that's the real question. AI is a tool and a help. It's just like a gun. It's just like anything else. But if the people, for example, in the Navy or the Maritime Police or whomever do not feel the backing of the people of Jamaica and the government of Jamaica, you're going to fail. On the other hand, if they have that backing, then the use of AI and other technologies, not just AI. So I don't want AI to become the code word for technology, because there's lots of technology. But if they have your backing, you're going to be much more successful. All tools are dependent on people, and all people are dependent on political will. So the question is, do the people, and you show that in many ways, do you support them? Do you say thank you? Do you pay them a decent salary? Do you show them that you care? Do you encourage them when they do things well? Or do you only criticize them? Those are issues. Now, I have lots of friends in the Border Patrol in the United States, and most of them see themselves as highly well-trained and well-equipped babysitters. They don't want to work. So you know what? I can give them as much technology as you want, but because they do not feel that the current administration backs law enforcement. Matter of fact, if anything, our vice president was bailing people out of jail for rioting and breaking the law, then you know what? You cannot expect the police to do a good job if they're not supported by the people. Police or any form of security is nothing more than the manifestation of a national will. If you will it, you will succeed. If you don't will it, I can give you all the technology in the world and you will fail. Thank you for your time and effort.
Ladies and gentlemen, give Dr. Tarlow a CMU applause for the work that he has done. We here at CMU, we are steep in the belief that recognition for work done is a critical motivational factor. And Dr. Tarlow, we want to recognize you for the lecture that you have delivered here this evening. And so I'm asking Miss Tanisha Hansen just to come forward and to recognize Dr. Tarlow in a very special way for the work that he did here this evening. Can you come forward, please?
Take their picture. Get in trouble.
On behalf of Caribbean Maritime University, we thank you for taking the time out to present us with this wealth of information on cross-border security in regard to tourism.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
From a beautiful woman. Thank you so much. My wife will love you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, all good things must come to an end. And there comes a time when the best of friends will have to part company. I think we are at this stage, but before you leave, I would like to thank you for coming. I want to express that gratitude on behalf of our esteemed president, Professor Spencer. Mr. Ellington asked me to call upon a number of persons to be here, and there's hardly anybody who we would have made call to who have not turned up this evening to be part of this lecture. We have the widest cross-section in terms of persons who turn out from the private and public sectors. We have seen the military, we have seen the constabulary, we have seen customs, we have seen ODPM sending their head, we have private business people, the CMU staff, and most importantly, our students. Give the students a round of applause for me, please. My takeaway from this lecture is the announcement that President Spencer made about a new program that will be coming on stream that touches on border security. And sir, you have the right support here as a person who is coming from that particular entity, border security branch of the JCF. You have the right support. We have a number of the officers who are here, police officers, military officers, they are ready to come on board. Right away we can look at our resources. They are ready to come on board to support an initiative and a program like that. So ladies and gentlemen, again we say it's a time-sensitive event and we don't want to hold it much longer. So thank you very much for coming, and we look forward to having you again, because this is a series of lectures that we do conduct here. It's not a one-shot thing. So from time to time, we'll invite you to come to our public lectures. But before you go, on the outside, we do have something for you, and we would want you to enjoy it before you leave. So you can unfasten your life jackets now and move about, and we wish that you will get back to your place of abode safely. Thank you.